The Constitution is clear, and that, of course, is the supreme law of the land, that the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus can be suspended in a time of invasion. So I would say that's an option we're actively looking at. Look, a lot of it depends on whether the courts do the right thing or not.
Wow, that was White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller suggesting that the administration would suspend habeas corpus if it disagrees with how the courts are ruling on immigration cases, arguing the president alone has the authority to revoke this country's bedrock legal right. So can he? Joining us now, MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin and NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Dilanian, and also Eli Stokols, who's still with us. Lisa, first off, define habeas corpus.
Habeas corpus is a form of asking for relief from a court where you're essentially asking for a release of a body. Conventionally speaking, it just means that you're asking to be released from custody. This is something that all sorts of people who've been caught up in immigration proceedings have been asking for lately. Usually you see it in the context of a prisoner who believes that they've been wrongly convicted. After their conviction, they can ask for habeas relief. But lately, we've been seeing it in cases like the Alien Enemies Act cases, Katie.
Eli, why would they want to suspend habeas corpus?
Well, this is the president who wants to follow through on his promise to get people who are in the country without documentation out of the country. And, you know, they could do this by going through the legal path and going through court proceedings. They do not want to do that. They appear to want this fight. And you heard Stephen Miller in a somewhat Orwellian manner say that, well, this depends on whether courts do the right thing, meaning the thing that they want. They want rulings in their favor, or else he is threatening to suspend the writ of habeas corpus and to basically, you know, deport more people without a hearing. And in many ways, they've been doing that already. I think, you know, the constitutional crisis is an abstract idea, and everyone says, well, when are we in the constitutional crisis? Well, if the people who take an oath to, you know, abide by the Constitution don't do that, even after court rulings. I mean, the Supreme Court ordered this administration to provide people due process and to return Abrego Garcia from El Salvador. They haven't done that yet. And so, you know, we continue to kind of be in this constitutional standoff here over due process rights. And this is not an administration right now that is showing a willingness to relent, even in the face of rulings from the highest court in the land.
Let me play a little bit from Meet the Press over the weekend from Republicans reacting to the idea that Stephen Miller says the president alone can suspend habeas corpus.
Would you vote to suspend habeas corpus if this were brought before Congress? Ultimately, this power lies with Congress.
The president said he is going to follow the law.
I think the courts are going to decide this one as to whether this invasion, in fact, constitutes what would be a state of war. Some would say it would.
Ken, what more can you add to this conversation about just this completely surprising idea that the president alone can do something that Congress usually has the authority to do, and by the way, is only done in a state of national crisis, emergency, invasion, war?
First, it was remarkable that none of those Republicans would even answer the question. They just didn't want to touch it. They didn't want to defy Donald Trump, even in theory. But the other thing that's important to point out is that due process, in the case of these immigration matters, does not mean a trial, which is the straw man that Donald Trump and his supporters keep putting up. We can't have a trial for every illegal immigrant in the country. That's not what it means. It can mean something as simple as a hearing in front of an immigration judge. The issue in these cases where these judges are ruling is these people didn't even have that. They were picked up off the street, and the next thing they know, they were in a gulag in El Salvador. That is not how it's supposed to work. The Constitution is very clear on this, that a habeas can only be suspended by Congress in time of invasion or insurrection. And I guess in theory, the courts could rule that there's an invasion going on right now, but that would surprise a lot of legal experts, Katie.
Rebellion or invasion. It was suspended during the Civil War. It was suspended in Hawaii after Pearl Harbor was bombed. If you suspend habeas corpus and say they try to say we're just going to suspend it for this group of people, can you do that? Can you just suspend it for a certain group of people within the country and then not have it bleed out onto everybody else? I get, like, suspending it for the territory of the state of Hawaii. It's enclosed during a time of war. But if you're saying we're going to suspend habeas corpus for all undocumented immigrants in this country, Who's to say that that doesn't extend to an American citizen?
Well, you should ask George W. Bush about this question, because in 2006, he essentially tried to do just that, which is limit habeas corpus or suspend it for a particular class of people, those who were caught up in military commissions at the time. 2 years later, the Supreme Court decided in a case that you couldn't do that, that was unconstitutional, that the act of Congress that was passed, and by the way, he used Congress, he didn't do it unilaterally, but that suspension of habeas corpus, Katie, in that case was unconstitutional. I want to point out, though, that for Stephen Miller, that may be enough. They may not be cautioned by that particular example, because they might think to themselves, we have 2 years to do this, and it will take 2 years for this litigation to proceed through the courts, for the Supreme Court to tell us no, and that's enough to allow us our program of mass deportation, where otherwise we're being blocked by federal courts here and there and everywhere, whether we're trying to mass revoke student visas or use the Alien Enemies Act or suspend, for example, temporary protected status for people from certain countries. Every angle of their mass deportation program has been effectively blocked by the federal courts, which is why you now hear Stephen Miller floating this other idea, well, maybe we should just suspend habeas altogether.
So is this a trial balloon to see how the public reacts, Eli? How serious is this?
Could be. I think that you have to take anything they say pretty seriously, given what we've seen them do already. I know for a fact that people in the White House love the contrast with, Senator Van Hollen going down to El Salvador and visiting with Abrego Garcia and showing Democrats as more concerned about undocumented people and the White House fighting to strengthen our borders. The White House loves that contrast, but the White House has also seen public polling, and there's private polling out there confirming that as much as the public supports toughening immigration laws overall, they do not support riding roughshod over the law entirely. And some of the more controversial and, the ignoring of the law in many cases and the due process rights of undocumented people that they have sent out of the country to gulags, as Ken said, that is not polling very well with folks. So the White House has to consider this and the possibility that they have an issue that they think of as a winning issue that they could be badly misplaying if they continue to lean in to just doing whatever they want, disregarding the courts in this country.
Ken Dilanian, say Stephen Miller said this during the first Trump administration. What would that DOJ, how would that DOJ have responded?
It's such a great question, Katie. The two administrations could not be more different. That DOJ was staffed with conservatives, but with normal lawyers who understood the law the way their Democratic counterparts did in many ways. They might have disagreed about policy. And they said no to a lot of things right up until the last moments of the administration when they said no, they weren't going to endorse Donald Trump's claims of fraud. Those people are not in this current Justice Department, none of them. It's remarkable how few, really no major senior officials from the first term are in significant jobs in the second term. What you have are a bunch of people who are saying yes to almost anything Donald Trump wants. It's an administration where Donald Trump decides what he wants to do, and then the lawyers try to figure out how to paper it. And so it's such a stark contrast.